Okay, thank you all for coming back. We have three wonderful speakers. Leslie Sussan, who is a writer and also a lawyer. Kei Ito, who's a multimedia artist. We'll talk more about him. And Pentz Gunter, an environmental leader and a writer whose book will soon be released. We'll talk more about that. All three of them have a connection to Maryland, but also to what we've just seen. And I think the theme here is also how culture is a way to reach people. Lectures and facts are good, but are there other ways that we can reach people? Leslie Sussan is author of Choosing Life, about her father, who filmed victims of the bombings, which were confiscated, as described in the atomic cover-up we all just saw. She's trained as a lawyer. She litigated for the U.S. Department of Justice, represented migrant farm workers and abused children, and served for 14 years as an administrative appellate judge for the federal government before retiring. You retired just in time, didn't you? You would have been fired if you hadn't. As we learned in the film, her father's request that his ashes be buried at Ground Zero took her on a journey to Hiroshima, and it changed her life and her work. Understanding the emotional trauma her father experienced from his time in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, witnessing the suffering as he interviewed and photographed the people, is part of what Leslie discovered as she did research on her father's story. Is that correct? Would you go ahead, Leslie? Go for it. Okay. You want to come up here? Or if that's better for you, definitely.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? How about that? This mic, okay? This one, I hear it now, yeah. So, hello, everybody. You saw a lot of my father's story in his own words, not his own voice, but his own words as part of Greg's film, Greg Mitchell. So some of what I'm going to say you may already know, but I hope some of it will be interesting. As you know, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima on a sunny morning 80 years ago and destroyed an entire city instantly in what is called by survivors the Pika Dawn, the lightning flash and the thunderous sonic boom that followed. Human beings were vaporized by heat, seared with burns, poisoned with radiation. Tens of thousands died immediately. Many, many more died in agony over the following year, and others have continued to die from cancer and radiation effects over all the years since. 3 days later, the second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, claiming even more lives. But the nightmare unleashed by these two bombs did not end with those who died. Countless more suffered from burns and radiation sickness, as well as physical and psychological traumas that would last their lifetimes. The survivors, the hibakusha, have carried forward the pain and the scars and have borne faithful witness to the critical need to prevent this monstrosity from being visited on any other city or people. The Nobel Committee recognized this year at last their service to the world in bestowing the Peace Prize on Nihon Hidankyo. But the suffering did not end with the hibakusha. The ripples from those bombs spread out across continents and down through the decades. My father was not in Hiroshima or Nagasaki until weeks after the bombings had already taken place. He was a young man, and he didn't know anything about radiation, as you heard. He couldn't comprehend how a single bomb could have created the moonscapes unlike anything he had seen in the other bombed cities in Japan. Nor could he understand why people seemed to be sickening and dying so long after the explosions. In other cities, people may have been crippled, but they were either dead or recovering from their wounds. He joined with the Japanese-American cameraman Harry Mamura, who you heard from also in the film. They remained friends for many years, and he visited us in New York when I was a girl. And they together made a record of the shocking scenes that you saw in the hospitals and tried to show the humanity of those who had experienced the bomb. Most of the film crew, meanwhile, tracked the damage to infrastructure at various distances. Among the people who struck my father the most strongly was the young woman who had lost her leg, whom he filmed on the roof of the hospital. The kimono that she was wearing there was the kimono she was supposed to have been married in, but unknown to her at the time, her fiancé had already been killed in the war. When they asked her to be filmed, her mother raced home and found the damaged, ruined kimono, washed it, and brought it so that she could feel decently as she was being filmed. Her name was, as you heard, Suzuko Numata. He remembered her, and she remembered him too. Soon after I arrived in Hiroshima the first time, I went to Peace Park to hear kataribe given. Kataribe is the practice of giving oral testimony by the survivors, the hibakusha, to make people aware of the horrors of nuclear weapons. One woman was speaking to a circle of students with only one leg, standing on only one leg. As she told her story, I saw her hold up a picture of my father. It was a tremendous shock to see my own father's picture in Hiroshima. Later, she told me that she had hated being filmed in that condition at the time, but that afterwards she was glad that the truth had been recorded so that the world would soon know. My father also thought that the footage would convince the world never to use another nuclear weapon. But as you saw in the film, instead, the footage, both the color footage that was shot by the American film crew and the earlier black and white footage shot by Japanese cameramen, were seized and classified top secret by the American government and hidden for decades from the American people, despite the continuing efforts my father made to get access in order to make the footage available to the public. Meanwhile, America went on to stockpile thousands of nuclear weapons, as it still has today. Numata Sensei met my father again in New York City when she accompanied one of the documentaries made by the 10-Foot Campaign to the United Nations, where it was shown to the world for the first time. My grandmother attended the event, and she said that she finally understood why the man who returned from the war was not the same son who had left. I never knew my father before Hiroshima, but I knew when I was growing up, he was often bitter and angry and afraid of the government. I knew he was trying to get access to some films, but he would never talk much about what Hiroshima had meant to him or what the films were about. I learned most of what I know and what I wrote in my book about the lifelong impact of what he had experienced only from an oral history that I discovered 15 years after his death. It was at Columbia University, and he had been speaking to a student. I had been trying to get him after his illness, knowing that he had limited time to write about his experiences, and he invited the student, and she was, as I understood it, helping him do that, and they left some notes. But in fact, she recorded all of the sessions and filed them in the oral history library at Columbia. and that's where I eventually found them. They were sealed because my father had not signed a release at the time he died. But luckily I was his executor, so I was able to access them. Much of his trauma, I think, came not only from what he saw, but from the sense of betrayal by his own government, because he had truly believed that America had not understood what would happen and would be eager to share the lessons. Numata Sensei, whom my daughter and I came to be quite close with, told me that I was a sort of second generation hibakusha. In Hiroshima last week, a group called Grandchildren of Hibakusha performed stories and gave messages to keep alive the memories of those who perished and those who survived and suffered. They are third generation hibakusha. But in some ways, I believe all of humanity is touched by the effects of the atomic bomb, and in that sense, we too should feel ourselves to be hibakusha and to carry the responsibility that Setsuko mentioned, Setsuko Totoro, to spread the message and help people understand that we cannot continue to live in the shadow of the atomic bombs that has loomed over us for 80 years. We must find a way to put this genie back in the bottle and eliminate these weapons. May peace prevail on earth.
Thank you, Leslie. That was wonderful. Our next panelist, Kei Ito, Ito-san, is a unique kind of artist described as a cameraless photographer. He's also a third-generation hibakusha, which informs his work and allows him to reach people in a way that words cannot. His grandfather, Kei Ito, was born in Hiroshima and was in middle school when the bomb dropped. The elder Ito became a co-chairperson of Nihon Hidankyo, which advocates for those exposed to the bomb and also for the abolition of nuclear weapons. He died 24 years before the organization was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this past year, in 2024. Kei Ito lives in Baltimore County. His work is widely displayed, most recently this week at Goucher College. And I saw his work at the War Memorial in Baltimore about 8 years ago. A recent article from the Nuclear Threat Initiative quoted our speaker as saying, "By grounding global issues in individual memory and emotion, art creates a pathway for empathy, awareness, and ultimately dialogue across communities and generations." So, is it your work still up at Goucher?
Well, Goucher is technically the private thing, so you have to make a phone call to make an appointment.
Okay. You can talk about it. Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Okay.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you for the great introduction. So many of my artwork, including the things that you see up there right now, I create many artwork that stem from the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and even United States. As you were saying, I was trained as a photographer, but I'm a cameraless photography. And what does it mean to not use camera to make a photograph? And this was a struggle I had for the longest time. If a camera is a device that takes picture in front of you, a lens points out towards taking external image. How do I capture something such an invisible force, such an internal inherited trauma, such as the bombing of a nuclear weapon, radiation, life and death, and whatever exists between these two? My answer was to get rid of the camera, to channel the most primitive component of the photography, which is light and shadow. I have making many artwork stemming from the idea that was told by my grandfather before he passed. He passed when I was 9. And as you would expect, 9-year-old kid, I was watching cartoon, I was reading comic book. I wasn't terribly keen on what my grandfather went through, and now I deeply regret not asking many of his questions. But one thing I remember him telling me was the day of Hiroshima was like hundreds of sun lighting up the sky. And this statement of hundreds of sun haunted my childhood and even until today. In order to express this matter, many of my artwork uses a very simple process of exposing these photographic paper to the sunlight to the duration of the breath. And many of my prints is one of the kind, and also it's never can be replicated because every duration of the breath, every single breath you make is different. Every sunlight that shines in the morning, in the afternoon, it never be the same. So I create essentially a ritualistic image making to create the connection between my grandfather and myself within the artistic experience. And I actually do lots of research among the American downwinders. I recently just went to New Mexico to meet one of the downwinder from the first nuclear testing in Trinity testing site. She was exposed to the nuclear testing. She's 93 and she suffered from cancer, so is her daughter. And by meeting these people, I create the connection between American downwinders and Japanese hibakusha and many other dots throughout history, throughout the geological location. And my practice is to make a line between these dots throughout history and the lands and borders and see where it leads, which is where we're standing right now. And it's already decided, but where we go from here is completely different. And I'm hoping my art can inspire for us, current generation and the future generation to imagine the better future. And that's why I keep making artwork relating the nuclear weapon. Thank you.
Tell us about Goucher.
Oh, yeah. So I'm having a private show at the Goucher. It's not technically part of the main exhibit. This was something to commemorate the August 6th. I'm actually making a film with my friend, well, not friend, but Atlanta-based filmmaker Roger Okamoto. And throughout past 2 years, we've been creating many artwork relating to the film, and that was kind of like a small premiere to showcase some of the artwork. It is available for throughout the August, as long as you make a reservation at the Goucher. But I also having a show in DC, 2 shows technically. Mocha Arlington, Museum of Contemporary Art Arlington is having a solo of my work relating nuclear issue and the sun, and that will go until first week of September. And the Johns Hopkins Bloomington Gallery is I'm part of the group show, which is in front of the National Gallery, I think. And currently I have a few shows, one in Barcelona, Ohio, and one in, where was that place? California. Somewhere. But yeah, everything is, any of the artwork is available online. So yeah, thank you so much.
We're lucky you were involved. You live in Owings Mills, right? You are, okay. Okay, last but not least at all is Linda Pentz Gunter. She's an environmental leader who founded the international advocacy nonprofit Beyond Nuclear in 2007 and serves as the organization's international specialist with special focus on UK and Japan. Linda was born in the UK, which you'll never be able to tell by her accent. She's concerned with the negative impacts of nuclear power on the environment, and she advocates for nuclear weapons abolition. She works to draw attention to the human rights and environmental justice violations of the nuclear power and nuclear weapons sector. She's the author of a forthcoming book, No to Nuclear, Why Nuclear Power Destroys, No to Nuclear, Why Nuclear Power Destroys Lives, Derails Climate Progress, and Provokes War. it should be out in March, and we're hoping the Ivy will have it for us. Linda?
Thank you, Gwen. Can you hear me okay with this mic? It sounds like it's a little intermittent. Okay, great. So I was driving in my car the other day listening to the news on the radio, which is always a risky endeavor these days because it's so depressing. And sure enough, a story came on from Nigeria about a very violent conflict that's going on right now between herders and farmers. And the reporter was in a hospital in Nigeria with an orphan boy whose mother had been hacked to pieces in front of him. And I just remember this sort of sinking feeling in my heart, listening to that on the heels of so much other horrendous news that we are bombarded with every day. And of course now we see the news all the time. And I just felt like maybe human beings are just really a horrible species, which is not a good feeling, because that sort of accepts that maybe we will use atomic weapons again, and maybe we will continue to look away at another genocide. And then I got home, and there was a text waiting from one of the co-founders of Doctors Against Genocide, which Gwen is connected with, Dr. Nidal Jabbour, and his text was related specifically to Gaza, but it said, "Getting depressed, discouraged, or giving up is the worst we can do to the victims of this global crime." And I thought, yeah, that's right. We have to keep standing up and speaking out. And we are able to do that now so easily. To me, the takeaways from these films was really about the power of communication. You know, what happens when we lose the ability to communicate, which was in that animation about the EMP, and all communication is lost. Or what if we suppress communication, like the images were suppressed? You know, the official images from Nagasaki and Hiroshima for 25 years. That was the newsreel footage, and the military footage for 45 years. So we didn't see that the way we do today. And it also made me think about the images we saw, footage and still photos from the liberation of the Nazi death camps. We saw those images right away, and they were used in the Nuremberg trials to convict the perpetrators. Nobody has ever been tried or convicted for the crimes against humanity that took place in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I do think sometimes that, you know, the images we're seeing now from Gaza of the starvation seem to be the pictures that have finally, much too late, but finally galvanized at least some action. And why is that? Because they're eerily reminiscent of the pictures from Auschwitz and other places. And they're, for some reason, people being bombed, burned alive in tents, the pictures we saw from Hiroshima, haven't successfully moved us against nuclear weapons. But the starvation pictures seem to work. So we have to keep communicating, and we've got a lot of tools to do it with. So Gwen and I were just down at the Japanese-American Memorial in Washington, D.C., actually on the evening of Tuesday evening, which was 8:15 in the morning, Hiroshima time. And this memorial is not only to the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it's also a memorial to the Japanese Americans who were interned in this country in concentration camps. And all the names of the camps are on the walls. But there's also an inscription there from the late Senator Daniel Inouye. And it reads, "The lessons learned must remain a grave reminder of what we must not allow to happen again to any group." To any group. And after I read that, I thought, yes, you know, how do we carry out the wish of the hibakusha, never again? And how do we carry out the wish of Daniel Inouye and so many of us, that it not happen in any form to anyone ever again? And I think there are a few things that we can do using our own power that we have. And one of them is divestment. And divestment has been, you know, quite successful in some areas in the fossil fuels, for example, divesting from fossil fuels. And we can do this with the weapons manufacturers as well. In fact, it is starting to happen. Your cities, like Baltimore already has, can pass nuclear-free zones, nuclear-free ordinances. You can get your city councils and your county councils to divest from the weapons of mass destruction. And also because these weapons manufacturers of nuclear weapons, there's about 20 of them, are the same companies that produce the bombs that are going to Gaza and elsewhere. So there's a lot of value in doing this. And in fact, last week, I think, or maybe it was this week, there was an ordinance passed in the city of Medford, Massachusetts. This is an amazing ordinance. It goes further than this. It was called the Values Aligned Local Investments Ordinance. It passed 5-1. It was driven, actually, by pro-Palestine activists. But what it does is it divests from fossil fuels, weapons makers, private prisons, and entities that contribute to human rights violations, including genocide. That's a very big encapsulating ordinance, a great kick-ass ordinance, really. And I think we can all at least try to get one of those through our city councils if you haven't done it already, but all of them even better. Our politicians need to know that we're not happy with them, and I know that that's something that Gwen can talk about in the Back from the Brink resolution, but we've got to keep calling them, we've got to keep letting them know what we think. Some of them are invested in these weapons that are connected to nuclear weapons, the weapons manufacturers. They have stocks in these companies. They're making a profit from other people's suffering, and we cannot accept that, so we've got to keep calling them. The third thing is really about this myth of deterrence. You know, this is something that has been bought into and sold to the American public and to the public in any nuclear nation. It's bonkers, really, but it's about believing that we're all a lot safer with nuclear weapons than without them. As long as we have nuclear weapons, the other country that has nuclear weapons will be too frightened to use them, and so they won't use theirs and we won't use ours. So obviously, if we're never going to use them, why are we spending $1 trillion on them? We may as well be safe by having no nuclear weapons. And the real key to this is that what deterrence hangs on is that you've got to have 100% guaranteed success rate with deterrence. There is no opportunity for a 1% failure in which a few of these get through. And that is completely unrealistic. And so if the risk is too great to say we'll gamble that it'll work 100% of the time, it's not going to. So that's why the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is so important. And in fact, I was introduced just recently to this. You probably know about it already, but Rajiv Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister of India in 1988, went before the UN General Assembly, made an extraordinary speech decrying deterrence, in which he said this: nuclear deterrence is the ultimate expression of the philosophy of terrorism, holding humanity hostage to the presumed security needs of a few. That's such a powerful statement. I think we really need to take heed of that. And lastly, because this is the issue that I work on the most, obviously, nuclear power, is coming to the understanding that if we continue to increase the use of, build more nuclear power plants, and export them around the world, and the push in this country for new nuclear power plants is largely about exporting them around the world. That's what Bill Gates wants to do to make money, is handing the materials, the technology, and the know-how to make nuclear weapons. That's the back door that unfortunately is in both the treaties that leaves the back door open to developing nuclear weapons in perpetuity. And it's exactly how India got their bomb, and it's exactly why there's so much confusion about what Iran is or not doing. Because they could make nuclear weapons, they might be, they might not be. They got bombed by this country and Israel for having a nuclear power program. So that's the kind of liability it is. So that's really important. And the other reason is that nuclear power, because it is so expensive and so slow, is actually the elephant in the room, not only for nuclear disarmament, but for mitigating climate change. Because if you invest time and money in a technology that cannot deliver at the same level as renewable energy, you're jeopardizing the future of the planet. Every dollar that you invest in renewable energy versus nuclear power will get you more carbon reductions faster. It's here now, we should be using it. The new reactors are mostly fast designs, which means they either use or produce plutonium, the trigger for the bomb, and they are just proliferation gifts to spread around the world. And so I'm hoping that what we can do as we leave here is to start to understand that all these things are connected. I'm sure a lot of you work on all these, protests about these things are connected to these things. So the climate fight, the nuclear abolition fight, the end to genocides, the human rights fights, tackling racism, which is endemic to all this, and one of the reasons that the US dropped the bomb on Japan in the first place, a grand experiment. These things are all connected, and we have to embrace them as one thing and not silo them into separate campaigns. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you. I know how to use this. I think I'll go to this. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. I know you all have been sitting for a long time, but we must have a few questions that if people want to come up or raise your hand, or any question to the panelists, or Dave?
More a statement of thinking of Baltimore and its proud tradition of dramatic protest actions a la Phil Berrigan and Plowshares. Just like to mention a couple of resources I hope everyone here is aware of. Max Obashevsky, to my left, sends out a calendar of progressive events you can get on an email. Was it twice a week or once? But you'll hear about all events such as this wonderful one. And another thing I just started, World Beyond War, is running a course on war and the law and nuclear treaties, the whole gamut. Fantastic academic description of what treaties and UN charters and ICANN and it's out there that the U.S. and other rogue nations are ignoring. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If there are no questions, then we might... Questions? Jim?
Yeah, so I wonder what the panel thinks is our top priority at the moment. If I may be so bold, I think our top priority has got to be a follow-on treaty to New START. But do you agree with that? That is expiring in less than 6 months now. By the way, Gwen mentioned it. I have some literature out on the table with the Earth flag. So do you see that? Are you in agreement that if we lose that treaty, all bets are off as to where we're headed?
New START is a treaty between Russia and the U.S. I think it was signed under Obama. And unfortunately, the Faustian deal he had to make was to let the nuclear weapons labs invest in more nuclear weapons. But it was a good treaty in that it reduced the number of nuclear weapons in both Russia and the U.S. to 1,500. It's a funny accounting method they have, but nonetheless, that was significant. And it expires in February, and that's the last nuclear treaty between Russia and the U.S.
Is this working? I would say it's a very important issue, and I think losing the last treaty, I don't know if I'd say all bets are off in that I'm not sure bets are on, but it would certainly be yet another nail in the coffin. My highest concern right now really is that the U.S. continues to have the same basic first strike policies and the same standard of essentially one finger on the button with no check on it. And that is the most terrifying thing to me, given who's currently got access to that button.
So there's a more professional person who can talk about a treaty and such. So I'm going to talk about human element of what I'm concerned. So I've been meeting many people who's still alive that witnessed bombing of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Trinity testing, nuclear testing, happened throughout 1945 to 1992 in the United States. And these people are getting so old to the point that their voice is getting either forgotten, disappears, and there's going to be, in generation later, there's going to be no one who actually remember or experienced the bombing in the first hand. And to me, how to make the voice that was getting lost preserved and passed on to the next generation is the most urgent thing. But then again, this is a perspective of the artist, not as a lawmaker or lawyer or such. But I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
I will say that I agree with that, and that is the reason that the book that I wrote about my father, it's Choosing Life, My Father's Journey in Film from Hollywood to Hiroshima. It weaves his story and our experiences following his footsteps with the voices of many of the survivors, many of whom he had filmed and that we came to know, and others that we knew, precisely because I think that preserving the voices of those who experienced it and can tell the human side, as opposed to the technical results or the legal standard, is, I deeply believe in oral history. And so I agree with you. I'm not an artist, but I agree with you.
I think these two, or any of, like, there's so many different components to make the nuclear abolition possible, and I think every single component should work together. And that's, I think, that what you were saying about it, not just a nuclear matter, but climate change and nuclear power, all of these things should essentially, it is a human decency. I think that's what it comes down to.
I mean, I think I will just say, and I know we have a couple more questions, that putting the human face on the story, I think, is really important across all of these issues. And we tend to get, a bit bogged down in numbers and technology and things. And really what we saw today, I thought, was so profoundly on point with this, that the footage at the beginning was just landscape, no people in it. And as soon as you saw the pictures of the people, it changed everything. And that's what I've strived to do in my work, is sort of, and in my book actually, is really kind of focuses on the, what this does to people from the very beginning, from the uranium mining on, because that's where it begins. That's where the first atrocities begin. And so the more we can do that, that's why it is wonderful to have every visual medium especially engaged in this and telling stories and bringing the witnesses to bear. And there's lots more behind them, because, the victims of the atomic testing that you met, and across the world can tell these stories as well. And they've also suffered horrendous health impacts. And, in the Marshall Islands, where the US exploded 67 bombs, the women there started giving birth to what they called jellyfish. I mean, they were just sort of, or piles of intestines. I mean, they'd never seen the kinds of health impacts before in that pristine paradise until we detonated 67 bombs over them. So keep talking, keep writing, keep painting pictures, keep taking pictures. We've got to do everything in our power to bring this story across. And, to your point about the treaty, I mean, it's really hard to feel like, do we have somebody running our country and Russia? There are two people that are likely to renew it or be sensible or do anything sensible that isn't jockeying for power. It's really hard in this current political climate. No, of course not. You can't give up, but it's you have to recognize that the timing is really tough.
So just quick things. Okay. We'll talk later about Back from the Brink, what that is, Leslie referred to. And there is a new group, Students for Nuclear Disarmament. It was started by a high school student, is now in the colleges across the country as well as high schools. Karen?
Sure. So there are ongoing projects where Holocaust victims have been videoed, and so the gentleman 60 Minutes, I don't know if it's being stored at the National Library of Congress, but it's a way I'm wondering whether anybody has thought of preserving oral history for people who can't hear me, in the same way they've done with the Holocaust, by videoing survivors and maintaining that in public venues.
Does anybody know if that's going on, if there's recordings of hibakusha?
So I can tell you the two things. Hiroshima, specifically, Hiroshima Peace Museum does an archive of first-hand interview of these people, videotaped, very similar to the Holocaust survivor. But the question is, so my great uncle, who also was my grandfather's brother, who witnessed the bomb, survived, but he was never part of it. He was afraid of even talking about it. He deny is the not right word. He didn't want to confront it until I kind of like asked him enough questions that he started talking about it. And he told me I was the first person to tell this matter that what he experienced in Hiroshima. So there's a many story that never told, and that's the other aspect of it. Specifically for the American Downwinders, the University of Utah, which I was resident for a year, has a Downwinder archive, which has the largest archive of the interview of the Downwinders who suffered from nuclear testing. So I just wanted to mention that. So the archive does exist.
I also want to say that you saw the bit about the 10-foot campaign. That actually began when my father met at the UN an exhibitor, Iwakura-san, who brought still photographs. They weren't really from his film. What they were photographs that were taken of some of the same people. So my father recognized a picture of Taniguchi-san, the man whose back was burned. And he told the exhibitor about all this footage that had been buried, that he'd been trying to access. And Iwakura-san was the one who went back and organized a 10-foot campaign and was able to get the government to acknowledge that the films had been declassified by operation of law. They were in the National Archives, but there was no card in the index. So if you asked to find them, you weren't told they were there. When he went back to Japan, he worked with several people, Dr. Nagai from the Hiroshima YMCA, in particular in Hiroshima, to find the survivors who appear in the footage, which was a big project. And many of those survivors had never spoken even to their family about their experience. There has been a tremendous feeling of stigma in Japan around hibakusha. Partly they felt they would have trouble getting jobs because people would fear their health. They wouldn't be able to get insurance. They or their children would have difficulty marrying because of the fear of genetic blood taint or genetic harm. So many people were silent. And when they went and located people, Dr. Nagai told me that only 1 in 10 of the hibakusha that he located ultimately agreed to speak. But those that did, they filmed, which is really good because it was long before the museum started its project, and many of those people died before. So there are another set of voices that were preserved. And the film Prophecy, there's another Lost Generation, which they made, combines the footage of them speaking with the footage from the war, from my father's film crew. And so those are, I have copies of those. They have not been widely released in the US, but they are very moving, and they are an important record of an oral history.
Terry?
First, I want to say that you all have done a tremendous job of putting together a very valuable afternoon of education and experience, and we're very grateful for that. You may intend to get into this, but I want to be sure that it's brought up. So in terms of following up on this afternoon of education and experience, some action should be taken. And one thing is to learn more about the Back from the Brink campaign, the Back from the Brink resolutions. There's information on the table out front. As was mentioned, Baltimore City was the first major city to pass a Back from the Brink resolution. You should know what that means and what that is. We've been working for 2 years to get a resolution through the Maryland legislature, and when the time comes next January, if you can speak to your legislators and ask them to support the Back from the Brink resolution, then that will be valuable. There's also a resolution in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House right now. There's a paper with a QR code which will link you to information about that, and I urge you to get that information, because being educated and so forth is very great, but it's like a lot of other things. If you don't do something with it, it's a nice experience. Like peeing in your pants with dark clothes on, and you get a warm feeling and no one notices. So I would urge you to do that. And you can also get on a list for follow-up from Back from the Brink, so that when it comes to the legislature next year, you'll be informed.
Thank you very much, Terry. So there, you see the organizations that are part of this, you know, support them, support us. This was a collaborative effort. We learned from it. We hope to be back next year. We're grateful to you all for coming. Real quick, Back from the Brink resolution, the U.S. should initiate, 5 things. U.S. should initiate nuclear disarmament talks with the other 8 nuclear nations. We should renounce first use. Why the hell are we going to be the first nation to use nuclear weapons? The president shouldn't have sole authority to initiate a nuclear launch. Our weapons should be taken off hair trigger alert. The land-based missiles in Russia and the U.S. are ready to be launched on warning before confirmation. So that's how nuclear war could start, by, I don't want to use the word accident, unintentional. And once launched, because they're ballistic, they can't be recalled. This is crazy. These are policies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, before there was cyber war and AI and all this stuff. And finally, we shouldn't be spending $1.7 trillion to modernize, I hate to use that word, all 3 branches of the nuclear triad. And it's just wonderful that we have bills in resolutions in the House and the Senate, and our dear, wonderful Senator Van Hollen is one of the original sponsors. Click on that QR code, you'll see it. You know, you can email, but it's really great if you call the office of your senators and congressperson and tell them, I think that weighs more. And yeah, and support the organizations. If you want to give donations, you can do it. Chesapeake, we're sort of the fiscal collector for this. Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, or Chesapeake PSR, and you can put August 10th there. And you know, do anything that you do as a constituent is really impactful. And then support other organizations. Cindy.
I'm sorry, I just want to know how we can get to the filming of this event for our friends.
So, Greg, do you have an answer for that?
I don't. Like I said,
hands to Greg, who did a wonderful job projecting.
Gwen provided the Parkway with links and videos that I was able to transfer so that they could be shown on the digital film projector, but I don't have a recording of the program, so to speak. I know that a recording of the panel was done. I don't know what Gwen's plan for that is, and if Gwen can, I know that there are certain videos that we had the rights to, but there might be some public things that Gwen could make available.
Okay, so Sonny was here, and he was recording all this for us. Oh, there's Sonny. You want to? And so we'll see, you know, how well the quality of recording the movies works. I think the panel should work, and you know, we can send out information to people. There's also on the front desk the links to all the movies if you want to see them. We showed portions of them, not the whole thing. So you can, you know, you can show it at home. YouTube, PBS, you know, I can. They're all in the public domain. Max?
Flush out a few things. Linda, what you said about what you said is so true when you talked about we saw the photo, not we, but our ancestors saw the photographs coming out of Auschwitz and places like that. I've been to Auschwitz. It's a tremendous experience. I urge everyone to go there. But all of the powers to be at that time committed war crimes. And if anybody has seen the Fog of War or read McNamara's book, he said if we lost the war, he would have been put up for war crimes. I just wanted to add that to the conversation. This is actually the 41st commemoration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in this city. On August 6th, we had a commemoration, and our issue that day was war is not green. And we went after Johns Hopkins University because they're the #1 nuclear weapons contractor amongst educational institutions. Check out, I can't publish a report about the weapons research, specifically on nuclear weapons research at Hopkins. They get more money than every educational institution in this country. So that's a very important issue. And we're trying to link up the climate people with the anti-nuke people. And obviously, people have already addressed this. The mayors at both commemorations in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they brought up the linkage between what happened there and what's going on in Gaza today. So there's a lot of work we have to do, and I really appreciate that everyone came out today. And it was, in my opinion, like Terry said, this was a wonderful affair, and that we're going to keep it going.
Yeah, thank you, Max. And Max has done a great job of bringing hibakusha to Baltimore over the years.
Well, one thing I missed. This is Dave Everhart. He was with the Baltimore Fort draft board raid, 1967 at the Customs House in Baltimore. He was in jail not only with Phil Berrigan, but he was in jail with Jimmy Hoffa. There's the whole story. Lewisburg Penitentiary. He's also in Phil's book, Punishment for Peace, and he's at his own book. So talk to Dick if you want to meet an author that's actually been in the jungle. This is the guy to talk to.
Talking about authors, is Vincent, oh, go ahead. Oh, please.
Oh, thank you very much. The film about the images being withheld from the U.S. public. So I'm curious about whether images of the human impact of the bombings were used in other countries, Japan and other countries, were the folks were us in the U.S. the ones that were without those images the longest. So that's one thing I'm curious about. And the other thing I'm curious about is disinvestment. So if I want to learn more about the disinvestment, what's a source that I should start looking at? Thank you all.
So I'll answer the first part, and then probably you're the best one for disinvestment. No, the footage was not available anywhere else. The U.S. seized not only the film that it had commissioned through the Strategic Bombing Survey, but the footage that Japanese photographers had taken. So there were still photographs that people had that were available, but the footage was not, and not in color. And in fact, during the occupation of Japan, which lasted until 1952, there was a press code in effect imposed by the U.S. occupation that prohibited any information, images, or statements about the atomic bombing altogether from any media, even poetry. I mean, poets were suppressed. So it's not just the U.S. that failed to face up to the images, but that the U.S. wanted no one to be aware. I actually think that they originally were, since they sent these crews to take film, I think the original idea was kind of a victory lap of this is going to show the world just how amazing and powerful our brand new bomb is, so everybody will, not mess with us. And after John Hershey wrote his article about Hiroshima, there was a sense that feelings were changing and that maybe this was not something you wanted to brag about in that way. And I don't know for sure who made these decisions, but that's my theory why the attitude within the U.S. military and the U.S. government was kind of 180 degrees around, and they decided to suppress all of the footage that they had commissioned. I also don't think they expected the amount of footage of human suffering that my father and Harry Mamura had included. So, yeah, that's the story of the suppression.
So I'm going to give you a couple of resources for divestment. One of them actually is a book which I hope the Ivy bookstore will also stock, and it's called Nuclear Abolition, a Scenario. It's sort of the counterpoint to Nuclear War, a Scenario. It's written by Timon Wallace, and he has a network, he has an organization in the US called nuclearban.us, Nuclear Ban US. And if you go there, this is what they're all about. He has a lot of good information and ideas and instruction on how to do a divestment campaign, whether it's within your city council or your county council or personally, we can do it obviously, but it's more effective, clearly, if we can get our entire community. So I would encourage you to get in touch with Nuclear Ban US, sign on to their email list, and they'll help you do that. And then Don't Bank on the Bomb is a publication that comes out once a year. And it gives you the good, the bad, and the ugly, actually. So it tells you which banks have changed course, often as a result of pressure from all of us, which banks need a bit more nudging along to go in the right direction, and who the bad banks are. And for example, in Tacoma Park, Maryland, where I live, which is a nuclear-free zone, we've been trying for years. We have a nuclear-free ordinance, but we have not been able to get the city to divest its pension funds from Truist, which is one of the worst of the banks. And so it's a little bit hypocritical, and we've been nagging and screaming and talking in front of the microphone forever and not getting anywhere, and we've taken a bit of a break, and now because we had to pass a Gaza ceasefire resolution, which was equally difficult, amazingly enough. So even in progressive cities, it can sometimes be really hard work. So, but I think those are the two resources for divestment that would help you get started.
Don't bank on the bomb. You can also, we talked about the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, ICAN. So if you go to ican.org, is it ICANW or ican.org, they have a Don't Bank on the Bomb.
Yeah,
and you can just click
with a
on
W
it.
at the end. But I think you can just...
ICANW, so ICANW.org.
It's sort of a standalone piece. If you put Don't Bank on the Bomb report into Google, you'll get it. And it comes out every year. They update it every year. And
New York City passed a divestment bill. It hasn't been implemented yet, and so the comptroller has to implement it. Interestingly, the comptroller is Lander, who supported Mandami, and so he may be part of the New York, if he wins, part of the New York City government, maybe, and that, so these things are possible. You may feel hopeless, but our comptroller is Bill Henry, who, it was the reason we passed back from the brink. So if New York City can do it, I think we can work with Bill Henry, and Baltimore City can do it. I'm just hoping, and I think Madison may be a city that divested. So little by little, these things are beginning to happen, or have happened. I don't know what's happening this year, but we can push. There are examples. Thank you for that question. Is Vincent Ntande here? Oh, you're Lou. You're not Vincent.
Vincent Ntande's dog ate a lot of his comforter, so he's had to take his dog to the vet. Seriously, he just texted me. Vin Ntande is a local person in the Silver Spring area, a college professor for a while, a nuclear studies researcher, and he's written 2 books. One, African Americans Against the Bomb, and the second one, more recently, Saving the World from Nuclear War. African Americans Against the Bomb is about African American leaders in the civil rights movement who were also pacifists and anti-war activists, but that role has kind of been lost to history. This rouses that, if you would. The other book, Saving the World from Nuclear War, is about the big rally that was in New York City in 1982, June 12th. It was in support of the second special disarmament session of the UN. 1 million people, some say at least 700,000. It was a vast crowd. And I was up there, but I was so far in the back, I had no idea what was going on. I came up on a bus from Baltimore, we got there late. I had to read the paper the next day to have any idea what was said. So this book spells out how did 1,700,000 to 1,000 to 1 million people end up being in New York City in support of this special session. It spells out the organization movements, the conflicts that they had trying to put it together, and how it finally did fall into place. And it was so impressive, it helped turn the first nuclear arms race around. We had a gigantic arsenal, something like 70,000 nuclear warheads in the 70s and 80s. And after 82, when Sane Freeze got the ball rolling, and that was a big part of it, and it eventually started getting Reagan to change his mind on nuclear armament and go for the votes. I guess he sort of thought the writing's on the wall, better change position. And then the nuclear warhead count started to fall with the various treaties, 60,000, 50,000, 40, 30, 20. A lot of people started sitting on their hands and saying, well, this issue is solved. Well, you saw what happens with just 1 or 2 nuclear bombs. We still have 5,000 in America. So we need to do something about getting another nuclear arms race that's starting to heat up. We need to put that fire out. I'm a huge fan of visibility. Baltimore City is a nuclear-free zone. We've got signs up on all of the entryways to Baltimore City. Entering nuclear-free zone, there's a blow-up outside in the lobby. And you can see it coming into Baltimore on virtually every single roadway coming into town. We're also a member of Mayors for Peace. Mayors for Peace was started in 1982 after the rally, and it involves now 8,509 mayors worldwide who have declared their cities against nuclear weapons and for their abolition. In Maryland, Baltimore City, Tacoma Park, no surprises there, Cambridge, Salisbury, Easton, Greenbelt, and most recently this summer, College Park. Now, it's not hard to join Mayors for Peace, but you do have to talk to your mayor and get them to agree to do it. Very simple form, and there's a lot of incorporated towns involved in Maryland, about 400 of them. An awful lot in the central of Maryland that are not incorporated, so those wouldn't be able to, they don't have a mayor or a town council per se. But if you're from a town that's not in the central part of Maryland, and you're like from Rising Sun or someplace that's got a mayor or a town committee, talk to your mayor or call me and I'll go talk to them. There's a lot of mayors out there that we can convert. They're not in favor of their cities being burned up in a nuclear war. And then lastly, I would just say, Vin and Tanya's books are out in the lobby if you'd like to get them. We bought them at discount and we're passing the discount along. If you can't take credit cards, if you have a credit card and that's the only way to pay, go to the IU bookstore, they have them. And lastly, Vin and Tanya is involved in an effort to raise visibility again by relaunching a magazine that came out in 1982, again after the big rally, called Nuclear Times. It was a single-focused magazine all about nuclear disarmament, nuclear treaties, nuclear weapons, nuclear everything. And it's lasted about 10 years until the fizzle went out of the nuclear disarmament movement. It was relaunched for a couple of years, didn't quite make it. And it's now being relaunched by Vin and Tanya and a couple of other persons that he's been involved with in the nuclear studies area. You can pick up one of these cards out back, out in the lobby. It has a QR code, more information about, a very little bit of information about it. You have to go to the QR code, which you scan it with your phone and flutter over it and all that. Ask a young person if you don't know what they're doing. I have to do that. And you'll find out more about the magazine and the effort to get it launched, and advanced subscriptions are being anticipated to be sought in, I think, in December and May, or December and January. I don't remember exactly when they're going to be looking for actual subscribers. But right now they're collecting seed money. If you have an interest in getting this publication back out there, Why is it important? Because it's going to be in print as well as digital. And that means it's going to be in bookstores, in magazines, sales racks, and when people walk by who are not on your little circle in your little Facebook area, they're going to see it. It's going to raise visibility and put the issue in front of people again. So we've got to work on every single level to increase visibility. Put a sign in your front yard about, I'm against nukes. Oh, war's not the answer. Come up with, pick a slogan and put it, just write it yourself. Put it out front. Put a sticker on your car. What good is a bumper if you don't have a bumper sticker?
All right.
Do that extra something, and let's get the visibility risen.
Well, thank you, Lou. Well, everybody's been here a long time, and unless there's a burning question, I thank you all so much. And thanks to all the co-sponsors and the people who worked every week, to try to collaboratively make this happen, and to the people at Parkway, and to our photographer, Sunny, who will hope we'll be able to get something that we can share. And thank you all. And try to do something, a call, something. Turn this into one action that you can do. There's information out there, and thank you.